again, if you're interested to chat online, I'm sure you've seen Don's posts. There's lots of things there, but if you'd like to contact him or Byron, I know Byron's doing quite a bit of blogs on Codera as well, on EconData, and the presentation decks will be made available as well. Don, I'm sure you're okay with that?
100%.
Okay, excellent, thank you. All right, so just a feedback in terms of the webinars. That's professional, and then the last one next week is for executives. Okay, so, and then there's a CDMP Q&A tomorrow, and again on Friday. The training has come to an end for this week, and then we've got a week of training in June. And I know there's some data governance training coming along. I'm just not sure whether it's here or in Saudi or UAE, I can't remember. Our conference, the DEMA conference for 1 December, I haven't had anybody ask me, and I was just wondering, am I explaining it badly, or is there a lack of interest? Esti, how you, I mean,
didn't realize we could register already. So I thought it was kind of like this will be happening.
Oh, no.
As opposed to like, you need to do something about this already.
Okay. No, you can register.
Okay.
So, and if you want to talk and present ontologies, I know Mark's going to, Mark, you're gonna put a paper forward?
I just wanted to know why you're going to make it free.
Oh, last year we started it and it was free, and so they decided to continue it. They've got quite a few sponsors, so I think it's the fact that it's sponsors, and we're just hoping that, or the people are hoping that lots of people and the sponsors will be able to get the value out of that.
Okay. In Canada, the Canadian DEMA chapters, there's 6 of us, are planning a conference October 2021, 20 and 21st. And I'm advocating that we have to charge, because if people can register for free, then they'll blow it off in the last minute and not show up.
Okay.
We're going, just so you know, we're approaching Amazon for $50,000 sponsorship.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Because it's a Canada-wide. Now you're running an EMEA-wide thing. I would, we're asking for big money, and we're gonna give it Amazon, Google, or Microsoft, because that's alphabetical.
Yeah.
And there can only be one platinum sponsor, and that $50K would then be distributed across the 5 chapters to pay for a physical venue.
Okay.
We intend to do it online. We can chat offline, but we're strategizing like actively currently. Yeah. We have a Thursday meeting across chapters to strategize. We want to offer hybrid, but we don't want to undercut physical attendance by people saying, I'll just do it on Teams later and I'll take the cheaper ticket for doing the hybrid. We really want to drive in-person participation, but we're doing multi-location. We're, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Ottawa, Toronto. So there's a lot of logistics and there's a lot of expense involved. So it's a different animal. But I'm just against things free, because vendors do free webinars all the time. If you want to learn about Elation Data Catalog, go to their silly vendor webinar and hear their pitch. These conferences should really be case studies, actual practitioners doing real things with commercial products, and not just. But that's my opinion. You guys can do what you like.
Well, actually, So I'll chat to Nino and we'll maybe include you on the next one.
In fact, Howard, I want you to book October 2021 in your calendar, because I want you to speak on managing your data management career. So I've actually put you down as a speaker already, even though I didn't tell you that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Nice, Mark. Now you put him in the spot, and like, he can't exactly say no right now, can he?
Not in front of the audience now. He can't waffle out now.
Recording.
Wait.
So anyway, enough of my nonsense. I'll get back on.
If you could see how I was going red, but not to worry. That's just the dashboard. Okay, so it is free. If you want to submit your papers, Esti, if you'd like to submit papers on that, please tell us. Or you can actually, as you register, you can say, would you like to attend as a speaker or as an attendee? All right, and then just some of the attendees. So there's quite a few people there. So we'd love to have you. And we are now dealing with the data professional. So typically the person responsible for the data management aspects, or the data engineering, as sometimes people refer to it. This is just a definition that I have. So it's not, a lot of times people see data citizen as almost related to a data science person, but let's not go on spend too much time there. So Don, thank you once again for your time and effort. It's been great. And I really enjoy seeing what you guys are putting together. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Howard. I'll share my screen now. Fantastic. Just bring this over. Excellent. So as Howard said, this is the third in the four-part series on where we're using EconData as a use case to talk about how one can productize your data. And what we have talked about in the past is we've looked at it from the perspective of a data manager, from the perspective of a data citizen. Today, we're going to talk about it from the perspective of a data professional, and next week, from the perspective of a data executive. So, as Howard said, there are several definitions of what a data professional is. A definition that I quite like is from the European Commission. And it's a little bit of a long one, but I'm going to read it to you. And they define data professionals as workers who collect, store, manage, and or analyze, interpret, and visualize data. Now, there has been a lot of discussion about whether how a data professional relates to data citizen. And in general, people think of data professionals as those who focus on the collection, storage, and management of data. Although there are some data professionals who operate across all of those areas that I've mentioned.
Yeah.
And this is also where there's sometimes a split between professionals who do work on the BI development side versus those who work with more on data science side of things. But I'm going to argue today that, from my perspective, that irrespective of the exact specifics of someone's responsibilities in this area, it's really important for a data professional to understand the use case requirements from the perspective of the ultimate user of data and those that are going to be building on top of data products, because that has very important implications for how you actually perform your functions effectively.
So Don, I wonder if I could just ask the audience, it's helpful for me because I've been keeping these personas separately, and I remember the first time we got into this challenge. Well, where do our data stewards sit? Where do our professionals? Can they be either side? And I've set up this definition. So, in my experience, and I'd love to hear from Mark and Esty and some other people, I'm certainly finding that most of our data professionals are the engineering type and the old BI side, but there are not many that can run that whole gambit. And then what I also find is, even though you can do it, you would typically operate with different hats on. So you'd be engineering the data, and then you'll be analyzing or modeling the data. And they're quite different. And I do agree with you that the professional needs to know what that end result looks like, so that they are making sure the right data is there. But we'd love to know and maybe we can delay it until the end, but as you said, you would be proposing a suggestion.
so from my side, well, before Steve goes in, I think, you know, someone like Byron is an example of someone who wears all those different hats in the way that we operate in Codera. And so, but he's, you know, I think, you know, you've referred to him as a unicorn. That's pretty unusual, and particularly in big institutions, roles are often much more clearly are split and a little bit more clearly defined. But I think increasingly with advanced analytics, these roles are blurring. So I'd be interested to hear what other people think.
I think they are blurring. I agree with you. So what we are finding is your sort of data scientists are coming in and then having to learn the data management because of all the wrangling that they do. Yeah, so it'd be good. Mark, I don't know, do you have a feeling on that? What's your view?
I agree. It's really hard to have one individual encompass that entire range, just managing the entire life cycle. Never mind the life cycle of the data, the life cycle of the data business.
Yeah.
You know, going from being able to fix, you know, do technical things all the way to talking to executives, sharing the story, securing funding. Certainly, I've been able to do that, but over a 20-year career in data management, certainly not within the first, you know what I mean? You evolve. You can stay on the technical track. You can evolve into more of a governance role, but then so the next level is the data storytelling, and getting the sponsorship and the funding, so you can do real data programs in an organization.
ST?
Well, it has to do with the size of the organization. So currently I'm working in quite a small team. So we do everything. And for me personally, I like to be involved in everything, but you pay with focus. You can't focus on everything at the same time. So I think later on you learn what your different team is good at. So Don might be good at this part. Byron can do everything, but he's focusing on that part. I think you get to know your team, and certain people want to be specialists. So then to kind of drag them, oh, you have to give this presentation on data storytelling. I think it depends on the person and the team. And if you can work well as a team, if everybody does everything, or if everybody just does something specific, okay, then obviously like project continuity, if anybody goes on leave, needs to be considered. Like things like that still need to be considered. But I think it's a team thing, what your team and how your team works.
Okay. All yours, Don.
Thanks, Howard. I think that was really interesting, and I'm sure we'll continue this discussion at the end as well. But I think, so I wanted to represent that same issue in a couple of other ways. You know, there's often a lot of debate about what makes a data scientist or a data professional. What are the domain, what is the domain knowledge that someone needs? And you see these kinds of Venn diagrams. And I think for me, so clearly, as techniques from computer science are being used in techniques and ways of work from the IT industry and computer science become used in other domains. This means that economists like us, like myself, Byron Rousseau, have been adopting those ways of work and those techniques from others, and having to learn about other domains in order to do that successfully. But likewise, I think that means that people from a traditional computer science or IT background really have to understand the kinds of models and ways of work from the business analytics domains, to be able to build infrastructure, to develop processes and manage processes that actually are fit for purpose for producing business analytics. And I think particularly in a big data context, it becomes incredibly important that these processes are optimized in the right way. You have the right type of storage, the right type of access, the right type of management of data for the ultimate end user. So it's both from a data as a product and data as a service perspective, because you, unless there is really good understanding of the overall data value chain, and way of work, it can be very difficult to connect the silos that ultimately need to work together. Yes, I think so. That's probably enough on that topic. But I think I just wanted to reiterate that point that the data professionals need to understand what their clients and the users of their infrastructure ultimately need. Now, so from the perspective of a data professional, there are lots of challenges that need to be overcome, and that they are responsible for overcoming. Data professionals are responsible for making data available, but it's not just enough to make the right type of data available. And so understanding what the needs of the client are in terms of availability, but it's really important that data is made available in the right form. It's made available in the right quality for users. So the understanding the right approaches to cleaning, unifying data that comes from different structures, different sources, incredibly important to optimize its use from an analytical for different types of analytics. So if an institution wants to move towards a framework of data as a service, you really need to create the right kind of data-driven environment to be able to support provision of the right type of information for effective decision making. And so this means that data professionals have to work with others in an institution to be able to tackle the kinds of problems that you have to solve if you are interested in data as a service. So you need rock solid reporting data models, and you need the right way of interacting on use cases so that you are able to answer the questions in the way that the decision makers need them to be answered. And so what I'm going to show you today is how we in Codera have struggled with this issue, and how, as a result, we've adopted a bunch of ways of work from other domains and technologies from other domains to ultimately develop data management tools that enable us to do the analytics that we need to be able to do, and do it in a way that solves these kinds of challenges. So I'm going to show you a bunch of specific examples today about how our tools help solve those challenges. And so today's going to be very practical. I'm going to show you screenshots of many of the kinds of frameworks that we use in Codera that leverage off of EconData. And I'm going to explain why we needed to develop EconData. And I think this to be able to do that, and I think this will hopefully highlight some of the considerations that are important for data professionals and thinking about how to ultimately serve their clients in an institution. So I'd like to tell you a little bit of a story about how about the genesis of EconData, and I think this helps also to understand. I think this links nicely to what Howard presented earlier in the week about how you work back from the ultimate, from the perspective of value creation from data. You work back from what the ultimate value creation proposition is, and then you have to understand what is needed to enable that. In our case, really what we needed to do when we started Codera was to develop the ability to automate analytical models, not just in the way that they are run, but to create an easy way for us to iterate through different, as we develop new models, for us to iterate, interact with the data management system in a way that allows automation and collaborative work if people are working on the same model or related models at the same time, for us to be able to also automate processes around the creation of models to enable us to more effectively manage data from different sources and have a governance process around the use and development of models that enables co-development in a real-time sense. So because we are interested in developing specific forecasting solutions and models that enable users to interact with them, and for those models to be alive in the sense that they always use the most up-to-date data, and if changes are made to models, those could be fed back into the data management system. We needed to build a data management system that has a couple of key features. We needed to make sure that we could get data from a variety of different sources into the same conceptual format. So, you know, in our case, this is public data, third-party data, and data from a client or, you know, our own proprietary data. Get that all into the same data management system, into the same format for easy use for modeling purposes. So that's really why we needed to develop EconData. We needed to have a way to do that, and the SDMX data information model helps us achieve that integration from different sources, and we've spent the last two of these sessions discussing that. And then it also enables a bunch of really important data management and data governance functionality, which is really important from a model automation perspective. The ability for us to continually refresh the data that models draw on and push model outputs and judgments that have been applied to models back into the data management system. And that's really important if you are working, if say different people are working on a bunch of related models and they want to compare model results as they're working. Or if one model, if there's dependencies, one model requires some outputs from another model, or from just a data management, data auditing perspective, the ability to look at the judgments that have been applied to models over time, and if you want to assess those at a specific point, if you want to know what data was used when a specific model was run, so a specific vintage of a model run, what data was used, what judgments were applied. And that's really important if you're in the forecasting game, if you want to assess over time whether you've been applying good judgments, and if you want to go back and apply a different model to the data that you had at hand at that time. So all of those kinds of features are, or those kinds of functionality are all enabled by the EconData platform. But I think it's really important from the perspective of a data professional to understand how data is going to be used and what all of the requirements are from the user to enable the right advanced analytics. But I think the other thing that we found, and you know, Byron can weigh in on this later as well, is that we found that if you follow the right process, then this doesn't have to be incredibly complex. We set EconData up as the simplest way to achieve all of that functionality. And I think the challenge in big institutions is that data professionals are often given a very long list of requirements that are almost impossible to meet with any off-the-shelf data management solution. And so in the end, data professionals have to try and coordinate the creation of bespoke systems that can deliver a wide range of requirements. And what we did in our case is strip back what are the things that we need to do to manage data for advanced analytics, and we developed EconData with that in mind. And then and one of the attractive features of the way we've worked is you can stack additional technologies on top of it to enable extra functionality. So the ability, in particular, we've done a lot on making it possible to automate reporting. For example, the dissemination of reports that run off models, and I'm going to show you some examples of that. Next week, when we're talking about executives, I'm going to focus in on this, focusing in on the business insights, the value from the perspective of executives that you get from the analytics that you do, and understanding the ultimate value of this this data value chain. But we can talk a lot about the different technologies that you can plug in once you have the right base infrastructure in place for advanced analytics.
Sorry, Don, if I could ask a question on this, and I know you've worked at the central bank in New Zealand, you worked in South Africa, this has been an area that you've been working on for many years. And I know that there was lots of stuff you guys were looking at in MATLAB and different approaches, almost to an extent using some of the scripting and that within MATLAB to achieve what you've done now. What you, from an improvement or a productivity improvement point of view, what would you be comfortable in saying that this gives us 10x, 4x, 2x, -1? I'm sure it wouldn't be a minus number, otherwise you wouldn't be doing it. What do you feel your productivity, this approach has improved from the previous way of doing things?
I think I'd like to give two answers. The first is there are some things you absolutely cannot do in the old way of doing things.
Right.
So there's absolutely there are new things that this way of doing things enables. And to be completely honest, none of this really is just our idea. This is part of an international phenomenon. The leading central banks, the leading commercial banks, the leading technology companies internationally all have their own versions of the same idea. That and that really that's why advanced analytics is suddenly seen as to be a new thing, even though I'd argue that really it's just doing traditional things better. But it enables completely new types of analytics that wouldn't be possible. So part of it is, let me make this that part of the answer a little bit more tangible, right? In some institutions, really no vintage data is stored in data management systems, and so you can't really learn from your mistakes if you're a forecaster or a modeler.
Okay.
You can't also really compare models. You can't run horse races between models. So that's a very simple example, but that's because of the way data management is done in many institutions, that's really not possible. So it's that kind of new functionality. In terms of your question about the productivity gains, one of the things I often would say to my team is that by adopting this kind of way of work, you can become a super economist. And it's not just that you achieve periodic improvements in productivity, but your productivity will continue to improve year after year, because you're able to templatize what you do. So you invest once in setting something up, and then it creates this externality, not just for yourself, but for anybody else in your group who can build on it. So I need to think about whether it's 10x or 50x, but it's certainly it's not just a 10x. It's a let's say it's a 3x every year, which then compounds to 50x over 20 years.
Okay.
But I think that's an interesting. I think when I think about next week's presentation and the value proposition, I think let me see if I can come up with an answer by then.
Yeah, because I have the experience of two massive projects that were set up to do this, and they both failed. And so there's a value proposition that you have there in that scenario.
But I think if I can just add one more example. So I'm going to show you some examples now later about running multiple models. And the things that Rousseau is able to do because we have, because of our templatized way of work, means that tasks that would have taken, in the traditional way of doing things, it takes typically one or two analysts to run a model, and it takes them a week to update it. We can now, everything is live. You can compare to the model, right? And so Rousseau's way of work is completely changed because Rousseau we can dynamically work together in a way that just wasn't possible before. So I just want to summarize this slide before I move on. So data professionals, are generally tasked with providing the infrastructure and automation capabilities for advanced analytics in this space. But where'd this go? What's really, really important is that data professionals have to understand with what the ultimate use case is for the data and how data analytics needs could be produced to be able to produce the right data in the right form, stored in the right way, and understand the way of work that optimally delivers all the requirements from the ultimate user's perspective. So I'm going to go through a couple of specific examples of how EconData and our way of work enables this kind of advanced analytics from the perspective of a data professional. So I mentioned that statistical quality assurance is really important. And we've talked a lot about that in the previous session, so I'm not going to repeat it. But I think it's worth providing just an example of the kind of analytics that once made available by a data professional to others really dramatically improves the value of the underlying data to users, and also helps with data governance. So there are really lots of benefits for an institution. So in EconData's case, the platform makes it clear what the transformations are that have been applied to the data. And this is really important in an economic context because seasonal adjustment, for example, is incredibly important if you're interested in understanding whether the level of a variable is significantly higher or lower than in a previous period. It's also really important if you're going to be using economic data and models. You need to really understand whether the right transformations have been applied. And so EconData flags that for you. It enables you to look at different versions of the underlying raw data. And some of the features that we're hoping to add to the platform over time will really be to automate quality checks, statistical quality checks in particular, so that users are able so that the system flags to users some of the quality of the transformations that have been applied and some of the data issues that those who are going to be using the data need to be aware of. And there's a lot, we've talked a lot about the metadata in previous sessions, and that's really, really important. The provision of detailed metadata, attaching it to specific raw data in a traceable way so that you can see the data lineage as well. All of those kinds of features are important from an advanced analytics perspective, and these are the kinds of things that data professionals are responsible for. Now, we in the way that we work, we have a multi-model modeling philosophy. So there are lots of advantages of applying different frameworks to data when you're trying to answer a specific question. Different models have different strengths and weaknesses, and different models perform differently over time. And so one model might perform very well for a period, and then there might be changes in the economy or changes in the data, and then their relative performance changes. And so the way that we work, and this is an example from a previous project, is we're always comparing different models, and you want to understand the performance of the models in lots of different. You want lots of different metrics of performance, and you want to measure those dynamically, and you want to store those performance metrics at different points in time. So, and you want to be able to go back and look at them. So from a data management, data professional's perspective, sorry, there's a plane going overhead. You want the data management system that you use to be able to store that. You want a user interface for a user to make it easy for them not just to see this kind of information, but interact with it. And so here what we did is we built a Power BI interface that enabled you to draw the most, to dynamically interact with the underlying models, select different ones to focus in on, do different kinds of comparisons between them, depending on with different metrics of their performance. And importantly, this isn't static. So you can look at this for us over the full sample, and you can also look at it in real time because data is revised. And then you can, as you can see here, you can actually dynamically select, what metrics you want to look at, and and understand how data revisions affect the relative performance. And so, from a data professional's perspective, setting up this kind of functionality is incredibly important. This is ultimately how a user will use the data. But there is this relationship between the ultimate use and the features that a data management system and the analytics and visualization software that you use there's these functionalities that need to be enabled. And again, all of this information needs to go back into the data management system for auditing purposes and for to be able to learn from your mistakes if you're a modeler.
So sorry, Don, if I could ask a question there. I know if all the people remember in the DMBOK, they got that data science process. And one of the things that really struck me was the situation of continually monitoring the model in production. And I've never really understood how I would model or how I would monitor the model in production, other than these errors, the error rating that it's coming up with. But in some cases, the suggestions that the machine or the statistics are making to respond to a certain request from a customer, these things could be going wrong without anybody really knowing. So from an ethical point of view, they said they need a feedback loop. And I get that, but there's other challenges in how do I really get the truth from the outside. But anyway, the idea is you got to keep on monitoring. Now, what you're presenting here is almost a case of let us not choose one model, but multiple models, and then continually compare the models on an ongoing basis, because for one season they may look like this, and then the next season they go wrong. Is that what you're saying in this whole approach to multiple models? It's almost like it would be really dangerous to stick to one and then not realize that it's gone out of kilter, especially in a production environment. So I'm trying to understand exactly in a production environment, how do you keep these multiple models going with multiple suggestions or understanding and then making the decision? I suppose I'm getting a bit.
So what we're presenting is really in an economics context. These are economic models for nowcasting GDP, but really the same way of thinking can be applied in a data science and in a data wrangling context as well. If you could, the exact what we've called, these are econometric models, but you could apply, you could think of this, you could apply the same way of doing things to transformations and assess them whatever quality metrics. You know, this could be data quality that you're assessing. This is just the key building blocks here are some kind of model, some kind of quality assessment metric, lots of these models, lots of assessment metrics, you know, dynamic in the sense that it's time series, and vintage. And so there's lots of complexity there, which can get very overwhelming unless you're able to summarize it in an easy to use report like this. And you know, the user doesn't have to even necessarily understand how the models work, but they can dynamically interact with it. They can extract the information that they need. They can understand, they can get a summary, and then they can make decisions about how to use it. And importantly, you know, we've shown you a Power BI example here, but you know, we use R, for example, and someone else might use Python. And the important thing is that you can set these kinds of assessments up in any software. So again, but the data management system needs to be able to accommodate this kind of must accommodate this kind of dynamic assessment. So just another some, you know, zooming in a little bit more and giving you some tangible examples. And this again is in the case of an economic context. So, you know, you're doing economic forecasts. Again, from a data professional's perspective, this is about enabling different kinds of users to interact with the raw data and then process data and model data in different ways. And so again, this is a Power BI example, but the great thing is that you can, you know, zoom in on data, you know, visually assess it. You can have setups that provide you with specific additional information and checks. This is a forecasting example, and so you can look at historical you know, this is just you know, this is a specific example, but you can see the forecast values. You can see you could see previous forecasts. You could see judgments that have been applied historically and by who. So this was on another project for we were now casting GDP, and you can see who set, you know, who ran the model, what judgment that they apply, and you can actually you know, summarize them in another way, and you can interact with all of this visually. Now, as Codero, we tend to use other tools. We don't work in Power BI, but some users may want to work in Power BI. And the important thing about EconData is that it's been set up in a way that you can produce this kind of interactive reporting in other software. But but the data management technology enables all of this, and you can you know, different users can interact with the data, but it's all there in a common format that enables other tools to use it. And here's just another way of looking at that same issue. If you focus in on specific models, you can look at the judgments that have been applied. You can look at the raw data that's been fed in. You can look at the various series that have been used in a model. So econometric time series models will use lots of different data concepts. And then you can look at the judgments that have been applied and by who. And in last week's presentation, I talked about statistical archaeology, that if you're running a model and you're a data steward or a data manager, you need to be able to measure whether the data that's been used by the model is the right data, the right transformations have been applied, and then your job is also to make sure that you actually, for auditing purposes, store all of the components of that modeling process. You know, large institutions can have strict auditing requirements because they may require an analyst to be able to go back and say, you know, what was the judgment that you applied? What was the quality of did you use the right data when producing a specific modeling output? And so again, something that the data management system needs to be able to accommodate. And increasingly, there are these tools various tools that enable you to tap into that data management infrastructure make it available to users in easy to use forms. Okay, I'd like to just dig down one more level, and you can see that you can actually get really rich analytics. You can make it very visually appealing to a user, and you enable different types of users to interact with the same set of data in a very meaningful way. An end user who's only interested in what the number is can just get the information they want, but they can dynamically interact and dig down and drill down and understand more and more of the history, the data lineage that was used. They can understand the story, the judgments that have been applied, and again, this is all stored for posterity and for analytical purposes in future. Okay.
Sorry, Don. There were two questions. The first one was from SD. What visualization do you prefer to use? SD, is that the language or the actual graph? I'm not sure exactly which one.
Almost the type of graph, because Don said they don't necessarily prefer Power BI, but no clients could prefer Power BI. So I'm just curious what they're using or like to use.
I think on this one, Byron or Rousseau should weigh in.
Yeah, I think it depends. Well, obviously, firstly, it depends on the client. But if the client is not hasn't given any specific direction, our preference is to use R Shiny for lightweight projects, and then React and a full set of web development tools for more production ready, slick, high quality products.
Thanks.
And then the next one is a question from Manj in terms of, Don, how did you define value add here in this context? Manj, maybe I don't know if you fully understand that, Don, or would you like a better explanation?
I think there are different ways to think about value add. From an economic forecaster's perspective, the most important value add is the ability to monitor model performance in real time.
Yeah.
So, and to define it and measure it. And so, if you're you can go back and look at we've got a working paper that we published based on this work that summarizes that aspect of it. That's, it's called Nowcasting GDP. And the appeal from a decision maker's perspective is that you can always assess which is the best model. You can compare it to external modelers' forecasts. You can compare it to a whole suite of statistical models. And so you can give a decision maker confidence that your forecast is of high quality, defined by forecast accuracy. And this is not in sample, this is out of sample forecast accuracy. So, and then by an economist perspective, that's really a key value add. Another value add could be that you can actually drill down into each of the models. And so different models allow you different storytelling abilities. And so let's say, one of the machine learning models was giving you the best forecast at the moment. And now you can actually go and you can look at what is driving that enhanced forecast performance from that model. And you can look at what is that model saying about the future and that helps you tell a story. So if you have a lot of confidence in one of the models, then you can put all your weight on that one and say, this is what this model is saying, and it's been performing very well based on this metric, and therefore we're putting a lot of confidence in it. So there's also enhanced there's enhanced insights that you can get. You can tell stories by zooming in on the models that you've identified as being the best. Then
that sounds like a lovely way of giving the model maker, giving the decision maker an informed way to make a decision about the model.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
And then from a data professional's perspective, all of that information is stored and can be audited and can be assessed later. And so the amount of value that you're giving back to the ultimate user, whether it's the executive or whether it's the data citizen that's running the models, You are turning them into superstars by giving them the ability to do what they couldn't do before, and to do this dynamically. So by making it so much easier and quicker.
And Don, just to share with you, I mean, when I put a lot of my BI projects together, one of the things that I ask for is a data quality dashboard and almost a movement of the quality over time. So what is the trend quality? And the recommendation is, guys, is to say that if the quality doesn't operate within a band, a min and max, and you actually get the users to define what that min and max is, then you'd almost go red on the dashboard at the moment to say, do not use this data for making decisions because the error is too high. If you want to make a decision, fine, but you're taking that risk. And it seems like you are now able. This is not just a quality issue, but this is also a forecasting issue where it's multiple business outcomes, presentations, and then you can choose which one suits you the best. And I'm assuming that you would, once you choose one, you'd want to keep the fact or record the fact that had been chosen for this decision.
Exactly. And so there are very big advantages to this way of work for data scientists, and really everyone involved in that data value chain can see different benefits that make their life easier and improve the quality of their work.
Thank you.
Okay, so just as a way to summarize, so let me just do, okay. We've talked about this in each week we talk about this useful heuristic to summarize the value proposition, starting with why should someone be motivated to use, in this case, EconData? What do they need to know? When do they need to use it? Where is when and where in an institution would EconData be used, by whom, and how would they use it? And by way of summary, the key value proposition from the perspective of a data professional is that EconData makes data from a variety of different sources easily available to users and assists with quality assurance of the underlying data. And ultimately, what matters for an institution or a company is what are the analytics that can be produced by it, and how does the data professional help enable those types of advanced analytics. And EconData was designed with that exact enablement in mind. And importantly, and this becomes, this is key for doing repeated tasks, as many of us do, and also removing the schlep of repeated tasks so that you can actually focus on value addition is the enablement of automation. And we've talked a lot about the SDMX information model in previous sessions. So if you haven't, if you're not familiar with that, please go back and look at the earlier sessions, because a lot of the advantages from the perspective of a data professional come from the fact that SDMX enables really detailed cataloging of metadata and the data lineage of associated with data, and other security and analytical features that are really attractive. And then just lastly, I think that's particularly important is that ultimately it enables users to interact with data using the tools that they want. And so there's both a data democratization element in terms of access, on the access tooling, but also that it enables you to be more agile long term, because you can actually, you're not hemmed into a certain tech stack. Users will be able to use different tools, even if you don't know what those tools will be 3 years from now. You can be confident that because you're using the SDMX information model, that's going to continue evolving, and it's going to involve and the tech stack that is going to integrate with in our case EconData, but more generally if you're using an SDMX information model, that you are protected against some of that technological change, because the whole community is moving with you, and you don't have to develop all of the BI tools yourself. You don't have to develop all the analytical tools yourself. You can, as we've said in the past, stand on the shoulders of giants, adopt the ways of the tools from others. There are overall many big advantages for the data science community more generally from this way of doing things.
Okay, Don, thank you. There's a question from Esti, and I think there may be a difference of understanding of the term bias here. I think it may be, but she's saying from a governance perspective, we need to prove that biases there might be in the model. So I know when we do sampling of data for machine learning and testing and development, we need to be very careful about the possibility of biases, and that comes in with an ethical impact assessment. Are we talking a similar type of thing in terms of you are almost in a way calculating what that bias is? It's not as if a governance person or someone would have to analyze the data looking at the bias. Is it a different understanding of the word bias here?
So bias has a statistical meaning in the context of economic modeling. So it's just that whether there's a model's forecast have an inclination to be higher or lower.
Okay.
And so a random walk model shouldn't show a bias. But Byron, I mean, you're the mathematician in the group, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. But bias is a commonly used metric to assess some of the basic that the model has some basic statistical features that are acceptable.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much correct. So it's just the expected deviation from the mean of whatever you're trying to estimate, right?
All right. So Esti, does that answer your question in terms of?
Yeah, that's very great, because then also like Don said, like EconData keeps that, so you can see if you're getting better at it over time with different decisions you're making.
Yeah.
And you can say how much better you're getting. So no, I think it's pretty cool.
So just to be clear there, you were asking about a governance process. I think what is being said here is that it's all about allowing all the models to run, and then for you to visualize what the different values are there. I mean, whether there's a further governance on that, Don, is that something, for example, that you built in to say if the bias is too big, this thing shouldn't be used? Is there something in that as well?
Really, the power here is that there's really many different ways that to use that kind of information depending on your specific use case. So I think a good example in our context is the fact that again, it's summarized in the working paper. We actually use information about the performance of the models to weight them up to create a single forecast. So in some sense, and you do this, in real time. So, each time you produce a forecast, you look at the performance of the models, the characteristics of the models, and based on your criterion set, you can decide to summarize the information from the group. And in our case, what mattered is getting a single forecast, so you can communicate a single, the best combination of all of the information. But if you're interested in governance, or it may be important. So if you're going to be kind of forensically going back and looking at the quality of the work that's been done, you can produce a report that says, these models have been, have had these statistical characteristics over time. This is how it's changed over time. And you can zoom in on the individual ones. You can do this for the underlying data, for example. You can, Howard's shown some examples of error reports that you can produce if you're a data steward. if you're a practitioner, you may want to know how many blanks are there in a data set, you know, and how systematic, how well are you systematically, you know, if you're going to be filling the missing values, are you using the right statistical approach to do it? How is that affecting your modeling outcomes? So there really is a lot of data management governance you could do, but there's also a lot of model governance that you could do.
Yeah.
Just a quick one, Don. This sounds extremely, you know, at times complex, and I'm just wondering from a from an info processing, info overload point of view, purely, how do you handle the overwhelm that must at times occur?
I don't want to diminish your question because I think it's a really important one, and I think, you know, in our own experience, we've certainly learned a lot because we've gotten it wrong along the way as well. But I actually think that there are a couple of things that we've learned here. One is that if you use, in our case, open source tools, and you break the question, you break the problem down into its basic elements. So you don't try and solve all problems. You solve one problem very well, but you solve it. But you iterate. So you solve it. You decide what the minimum solution is you need to achieve, and then you can improve it over time. But you focus on that. You don't solve all problems at once. You know, this could be done very quickly. We built this technology as a small team, you know, within a couple of months. So things that this kind of complexity looks very daunting, but if you use open source tools, you can do this pretty quickly if you strip the question, the problem down to its bare components. So it's actually solving the complexity is actually quite achievable. B, I think what we've also learned is that if you understand what the end user needs to understand to make decisions. So in this case, the end user wants to know what is the best model, why is that model the best, and what about that model is making it the best. If you're able to interactively answer those questions and quickly, and in a way that's not, you know, that doesn't, you know, require you to show a bunch of code, but you can actually visualize everything in it quickly, and you can do it dynamically. So in front of someone as they're asking, you can answer those questions. It creates credibility, and the ability, it puts the information at your fingertips to be able to convince someone, even though this seems really complex. But I think the reason I showed you this this picture is, I think, because the only way to really do that well is if the different domain experts are able to collaborate, and they understand each other. You know, and I think that's really helped us is by working, because we've had a team that have each has some specific domain expertise, but there's enough overlap that they can collaborate very effectively quickly.
And I think what I take away from it is, you know, there's a sense that you're kind of underestimating the kind of critical skills that that are needed, because, you know, if you have somebody that doesn't have the breadth and the depth to be able to visualize the entirety of the project and then be able to get into the granular details and then be able to call on the resources necessary and do that without missing a beat. You know, those are, yeah, not to be underestimated.
And I think it's easy for us to say because we're a small group. I think in a large institution where there are many stakeholders, this is not trivial. So, you know, your point's very well taken, I think. And many institutions, in my opinion, many large institutions are, as a result, really struggling with advanced analytics, because the problem of advanced analytics is just too complex if you have 200 people in the room, and you have, you know, and you don't have enough of this overlap.
Yeah, too true. Thank you.
Good. Any more questions? Are there quite a few of us there? Any more questions that anyone would like to ask?
Surprisingly enough, no more questions from me. Look at that.
Fantastic. Thank you. So just maybe to close off, and if you can leave it on that screen, just sharing with the data professionals, and I think this is one of my take homes from moving away from working in the banks to moving in a central bank was I had no idea of what the statistical world was like, because I'd worked mainly in retail and things like that. And just getting an understanding of, as Don says, the professional needs to understand what the econometrician or the statistician they're looking for. I think it's a very helpful learning experience for us, because we may go into one of these areas that are living statistics and just to get that understanding and to realize that there's a different world for you to learn and understand. I think it's a very important learning curve for all of us. And hopefully, if you are exposed to this will bring back memories, and you'll be able to refer back to it. It was certainly a great lesson for me. I enjoyed a lot. And yeah, just thank you, Don. Thank you for everything. Thank you for almost teaching us as professionals what we need to understand when it comes to this type of environment or this type of data. This is a type of data that I think that the challenge is going to be similar to all companies that use this type of data. Would that be correct, Don? So,
agreed. Thank you.
I think what I'd add is that really the important thing is to keep learning. This is incredibly dynamic. The tools are changing, the types of data available, it keeps changing. But the good news is that I think these problems are not completely or as complex as they at first appear if you tackle them in the way that we've described. I think we've shown that that's possible. But again, this is in our context of economic data. When you start using multiple different types of data, the problem does get more complicated.
Yeah. And I would just like to, that's one area in the data science thing that I've always battled with, is how to monitor the model that's running in production and how to make sure that it's not coming up with rubbish or really bad answers. And I think it certainly shed some light for me in terms of opportunities and ways of doing stuff, in not just selecting a single model, but multiple that you can compare. Great. Guys, thanks everybody. If there are no more questions, I'd really like to appreciate it. I appreciate Don for the work, Byron and Rousseau. Thanks, guys. You're doing a great job, and best of luck.
Great, thanks, Howard. And yeah, come next week, we're going to present on data executives. It should be a fun one as well.
That's great. Thanks, fun. Thanks, everybody.
Great stuff. Thank you. Bye now.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.